my name's Ellie and I'm Stitchinbeeee here on flosstube and also over on Instagram. Welcome to my spin-off series of Stitchinbeee's Create With Me, and this is the second instalment of my Easter egg series. So I hope you're following along and enjoying it. Just a quick recap if you've not seen my first video, go and check that out if you're interested in how I determine what fabric I've used, how I've organised my threads, and I've shown you the wooden egg which we're going to put the cross stitch on in the end. And that's the aim of the game anyway. So as I said before, this is a lovely caterpillar cross stitch pattern called Easter Extravaganza, and I'll be stitching this egg in the middle. So we're all good to go in terms of fabric. So I've ironed this fabric. As I say, I put some water on it first just to smooth out those creases, and it's made it a lot nicer to stitch on and looks much more appealing to work with. I've got my lovely little Needleminder from Dontsteponyourneedle and my John James size 26 needle all ready to go. So next I'm going to determine where the middle of the fabric is, and that is how I've always started my cross stitch projects and probably always will. Obviously I can't show you the pattern or anything, so I'll just need to take that aside and look at it without the camera looking. So basically the pattern always would have a line that shows you where the middle point is. So you'll have the vertical axis and the horizontal axis, and where they meet will be the middle starting point. So basically to calculate the middle point, I'm just going to divide the 56 stitches by 2, which is 28 stitches. So 28 will be the middle point, and then 42 stitches, divide that by 2, will be 21. So we are going to be, our axis is going to be 28 stitches down, and it is going to be 21 stitches across. So I'm going to go and work that out just now. So the middle point is actually the same as it is on this pattern already because we're stitching the middle egg. So what I'm going to do is pick the colour that I'm going to start with. The actual middle starting point is a white, but I think that might not show up so well with the camera, so I'm going to go for this lovely teal colour instead, just so you can see it a little bit clearer. Right, so I'll pop that to one side. So I've got my 6 strands of DMC thread, and all I'm going to do is separate them. So I've got 1 strand remaining, which I'm actually going to use the stitch with. So you see how they all subdivide. So all I'm going to do is hold on to the 1 strand that I'd like and keep my fingers tight on the rest of the length of thread. Just keep pulling, and then we've got the 5 left. Pop that to one side, and then we've got 1 single strand of DMC. So ordinarily you could get 2 strands, and you could start with holding like a long tail, if that works for you. Whereas I just use the loop start method. So I put my 2 ends together, and see you've got a loop at the end there, which I've got my finger around. Then all I'm going to do is take my needle and thread it. Just like that. And then we've got the 2 strands, so that works really well. So I'm going to take my Needleminder off just for the moment whilst I measure. The main thing when you're measuring fabric to find the middle is make sure you're in the correct orientation. So we can just, I mean it is quite clear to see, but I'll just double check for my own peace of mind. So we're 7 inches across here roughly, and we are just about 8 inches high. So as we can see from the previous design, that we are taller than we are wider. So that is the correct orientation. So what I'm going to do now is fold it in half. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because my cutting's not perfect either. And I'm going to halve it again. And then where that kind of middle point is, I'm just going to pop my needle. Then I'm just going to open it out make sure we're still in the correct orientation, and then I'm just going to move it around, so I'm then going to come up from the back instead, so just keeping a close eye on where I need to go. So this point here where my needle now is the middle point of the fabric. And as I say, the stitch of where exactly in the middle is white, so I'm using a different colour, so I'm going to have to count out the way. So when I'm counting, I always stitch bottom left, top right. So I always use that as a starting point. So I'll imagine this stitch here starting from the bottom left, and then this is even weave. So we're going to move across, if you can see there, obviously the smaller holes, but we're doing 3 squares is the equivalent to 1 square. So that'll give us the 2/2 stitching. So what I'm going to do is double check where my middle is. So I always count number 1 is where my needle is. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 across. So we're going to do 1, counting the one that I'm already in, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go, actually, I'm going to go 1 more over. Sorry, I just miscounted that. Over 1 more. And then we're going to go up 3. So 1, 2, 3. And then I found where that colour starts. So I always work top down in terms of the way I stitch. So I just pull it through, so I've just got enough. And then I'm going to pop my needle into that top right corner of the square and pull it through, but not all the way, because I'm going to then turn my fabric over, pull it through a little more, find where my loop is and pop my needle through, and that's how I start my stitching. So then I'll just show you a couple of stitches. So I'm now going bottom right to top left. And that's how I always do my stitching. And I always stitch in hand as well. I know that's probably a controversial thing to do. I stitch in hand, but I don't use the sewing method. I still use the Danish method. So it's a case of doing all the crosses one way and then doing back the other way. So I've got a knot here, so I'm just gonna free that. Sometimes your fabric threads just get a little bit twisted, so if you just put your needle through the knot there, and it just comes undone. Doesn't always happen as nicely as that, but thankfully that wasn't. It was more twisted than knotted. coming to our last stitch of this section. I normally like to keep my backs nice and neat, so I don't carry my thread any further than just 1 or 2 stitches, and if I was to carry, I would turn my work over and I would go through the back of the stitching. And that just means that you don't have any threads showing. Sometimes if you put this up to light, especially if you've got a light fabric, you can see the threads trailing across, so I don't normally do that for that reason. So that's us all stitched that little section. So now I'm going to show you how I do a pin stitch to finish that off. So hopefully that will be focusing. Yep, so there's my finished stitches. So what I'm going to do, this is easier on even weaving linen than it is Ada. I've never attempted this on Ada. But because we've got the 9 different holes, we've actually got a hole that sits here right between the top and the bottom hole where the thread is already sitting. So what I'm going to do is come up through that middle hole, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is go down into the center hole, again that has no thread going through it already, and just pull that through. And then I do the same on the other side, so again finding that middle hole that doesn't have the thread through it, coming up through there, reorientating the fabric makes it a little bit easier, and then I'm going to go back underneath that stitch into the middle, and then I'm just going to pull it through, and then I just smooth out the stitch, making sure you can't see where I've been. And then if you turn that over, that thread is nice and secure. Now I'll just get my embroidery scissors and I can just snip nice and close to the work, and that's it all secured. Put my needle minder back on now. There we go. And I can just, yeah. So that's the first little section all stitched. I hope you found that useful. And yeah, I'm just going to continue exactly the same way and stitch the rest of the project. And then we'll catch up again for finishing. Happy stitching, bye!